I didn't think I'd ever miss the sound of my heels clicking on marble, but standing there in the rain, barefoot on broken asphalt, watching the lock turn on what used to be my front door, I would have given anything to hear that sound again. The security guard didn't even look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on some point past my shoulder, like I was already a ghost. "Miss Eva, I have orders. You're no longer a resident here." My uncle's voice echoed in my head, smooth as silk and twice as cold. "Your father left everything to me. There's nothing for you." I stared at the ornate door, the one I'd walked through 1,000 times without thinking, without gratitude, without even noticing the carved details my grandfather had commissioned. Now it was just wood and metal, just a barrier, just another thing that used to be mine. I had $20 in my pocket, a suitcase with clothes worth thousands and nowhere to go. The rain soaked through my coat, cashmere, probably ruined now, and I realized I was shaking, not from cold, from fear. 3 days earlier, I'd been picking out which car to take to brunch, the Mercedes or the Audi. Such difficult decisions. Now I was standing in Nana's tiny kitchen, the woman who'd raised me while my parents built empires and conquered markets, stirring weak tea because that's all she had. The apartment smelled like mothballs and old memories and something vaguely medicinal that made my throat tight. She didn't say, "I told you so," when I showed up with my suitcase and tear-stained face. She just opened the door wider, her arthritic hands gentle on my arm. "Your uncle moved fast," she said, handing me the cup. Her hands shook a little. She was older than I remembered. When had that happened? But there's something he doesn't know. She pulled out a manila envelope, the paper soft with age, edges worn like it had been handled many times. "Your grandfather's first house, the one he bought when he came to this country with nothing but a dream and a strong back. Your father told me once, if anything happened to him, that house was yours. He never got around to changing the official papers, always too busy with the next deal, the next merger. But he told me, he wanted you to have it. He wanted you to understand where you came from." I took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a deed, an address in a neighborhood I'd only seen from car windows, usually while texting or checking my makeup. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. Nana smiled sadly. "He was going to. He had plans. But time ran out, mija. It always does." The address led me to a neighborhood where children played in the streets and music drifted from open windows, cracked sidewalks, laundry hanging between buildings like colorful flags, dogs barking, the smell of cooking, garlic and spices I couldn't name, mixing with exhaust and something sweet from a panaderia on the corner. The house stood narrow and faded, squeezed between two others like an afterthought. Paint peeled in long strips, revealing older colors underneath. Blue, then yellow, then something that might have been white once. The front window had tape over a crack in the shape of a star. I stood there holding Nana's key, and something in my chest tightened. This was mine. This broken, forgotten, utterly real thing. This was my inheritance. I pushed the key into the lock. It stuck. Of course it did. I pushed harder, jiggled it, felt a surge of frustrated tears, and then the door swung open to reveal a man standing in the hallway, holding a bag of vegetables. We both froze. He had soil under his fingernails. I had mascara running down my face. "Who are you?" we said at the same time. He was maybe 30, wearing a faded green shirt with soil stains on the sleeves and a small tear near the collar. His hair needed cutting, dark and wavy, and falling into eyes that were watching me with confusion and something else. Wariness, maybe. He looked at me like I was the intruder. "I live here," he said. "I'm Leo. I rent from—" He stopped, and I saw recognition flash across his face. "From Mr. Castellano. Your father?" I nodded slowly, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Leo set down his bag carefully, like the vegetables were precious. "I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Always fair. Never raised the rent even when he could have." He paused, shifting his weight. "I'm a month ahead on rent. I can show you the receipts if you want. Everything's documented." There was pride in his voice and something defensive, like he'd had to prove himself before. We stood in that hallway, neither of us moving. The house smelled like cooking oil and old wood and something earthy that I later learned was potting soil. Through the doorway behind him, I could see a tiny kitchen, a table with one chair, vegetables spread across newspapers like he'd been sorting them, a coffee pot on the stove, a single window with thin curtains that had been white once. "I'm not here to kick you out," I heard myself say, and was surprised to find I meant it. I need a place to stay. Leo looked at me for a long moment. I saw him taking in my expensive coat, my ruined designer shoes, the suitcase that probably cost more than his month's rent. There's a room upstairs. It's small, no furniture. He gestured toward the stairs. But it's dry. The roof doesn't leak. Much. A hint of humor touched his voice. You're welcome to it. Until you figure things out. I wanted to thank him. Instead, I just nodded and climbed the stairs, my suitcase banging against the walls that were too narrow, too close, too different from everything I'd known. The room was exactly as he'd described. Small, empty, a window overlooking an alley where someone had planted flowers in old paint cans. I sat on the floor and cried for the first time since my father died. Really cried. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, that sounds ugly and feels like drowning. Below me, I heard Leo moving around, the sound of running water, a pot clanking against the stove. Normal sounds, poor sounds, my sounds now. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I slept there on the hard floor, using my coat as a blanket, dreaming of marble and locked doors. The next morning, I woke to shouting in the street, someone calling for their kid, horns, a truck rumbling past, the smell of frying food from somewhere nearby, making my stomach clench with hunger. My back ached from sleeping on the floor. My neck was stiff. I'd used my coat as a blanket, and now it was wrinkled beyond recognition. When I came downstairs, moving carefully like the house might reject me, Leo was already gone. There was a note on the kitchen table, written on the back of a receipt in neat handwriting. Coffee in the pot. Help yourself. Mugs in the cabinet above the sink. The coffee was strong and bitter and perfect. I drank it standing at the window, watching people hurry past with purpose. Everyone had somewhere to be, something to do. Jobs, lives, routines. I had nothing. My phone buzzed. Gabo, my ex-boyfriend, the one who'd stopped returning my calls the day after the funeral, who'd been too busy to come to the service. Ava, I heard what happened. That's terrible. I can't believe your uncle would do that. We should talk. Maybe dinner this week? I stared at the message. I'd seen that pattern before. People circling back when they thought the storm had passed, ready to pick at what remained, to see if there was anything worth salvaging. I deleted it without responding. Some connections aren't worth maintaining. I needed money. I needed work. The thought was foreign, almost laughable. I'd never worked a day in my life, had never needed to, had been raised to believe that work was something other people did. But how hard could it be? I got dressed in the only casual clothes I owned, jeans that cost more than most people's monthly grocery bill, a silk blouse, leather ankle boots. I still looked expensive, which felt wrong somehow, like wearing a costume to the wrong party. I walked until I found a small grocery store with a help wanted sign taped to the window. The owner looked me up and down, taking in my manicured nails, my perfect hair, my visible discomfort. You ever worked a register? No, but I can learn. I'm good with numbers. He shook his head. Can't afford to train somebody from scratch. Try the vegetable stand on Morrison Street. Luis is always looking for help. He's more patient than me. Morrison Street was 6 blocks away. By the time I got there, my feet hurt. These boots weren't made for walking. The vegetable stand was a collapsing wooden structure with crates of produce stacked high and a hand-painted sign that said, Luis's Fresh Vegetables, in cheerful yellow letters. Luis was about 60, weathered like old leather, with hands that looked like they'd worked every day of his life. He was sorting tomatoes with careful precision, placing the perfect ones in front, the slightly bruised ones to the side. You know anything about vegetables? He asked without looking up. No. You know anything about work? No. He laughed. But it wasn't mean. It was almost fond, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. At least you're honest. Can't teach someone who lies. $5 an hour, cash daily. You start now. I blinked. Now, but You want the job or not? I do. Then you start now. The work was harder than I'd imagined. So much harder. My hands weren't made for lifting crates of potatoes. They were made for holding champagne flutes and signing credit card receipts. By noon, I had blisters forming on my palms, angry red spots that stung with every movement. By 3, my back screamed in protest. My feet throbbed. Sweat ran down my spine, making my silk blouse stick uncomfortably. Luis showed me how to arrange the produce so it looked appealing. how to spot rot before it spread, how to tell which customers were serious and which ones would squeeze every tomato and buy nothing. "Presentation matters," he said, adjusting a display of bell peppers. "People eat with their eyes first. You make it look good, they want to buy. You make it look sad, they walk past." I thought about the restaurants I used to go to, the plated food that cost more than Louis probably made in a week. The microgreens arranged just so, the sauce drizzled with artistic precision, the garnishes I'd barely noticed. I'd never thought about who'd grown it, who'd carried it from field to truck to market, who'd arranged it so carefully for people like me to consume without thinking. At the end of the day, Luis handed me $25 in wrinkled bills. The money was warm from his pocket. "You did okay," he said. "Better than I expected for someone with hands like yours. Come back tomorrow if you want." I clutched those bills like they were gold, because right then, they were. They represented 8 hours of my life, of my effort, of proof that I could survive. I stopped at a corner store on the way home and bought eggs, bread, and cheap coffee. The cashier didn't look at me twice. I was just another customer, just another person. It felt strangely liberating. Leo was cooking when I got home. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something I couldn't identify. Cumin, maybe, or paprika. He looked up when I walked in, taking in my disheveled appearance, and his eyes widened slightly. "How'd it go?" "I got a job. At a vegetable stand." I held up my blistered hands. "I'm not very good at it yet." He smiled, and it changed his whole face, softening the tired lines around his eyes. "That's good. That's really good. And you'll get better. Your hands will toughen up." He gestured to the stove. "I made extra if you're hungry. Nothing fancy. Just rice and beans and some vegetables that were getting too old to sell." We ate at the small table, our knees almost touching in the cramped space. The food was simple, but it tasted better than anything I remembered. Maybe because I was truly hungry for the first time in my life. Maybe because it was made with care. Maybe because I'd earned it. "Where do you work?" I asked. "I have a small stand too. Fruits mostly, some vegetables. Been trying to grow the business, make it something real." He paused, pushing rice around his plate. "It's slow going." "Why?" "Competition, location, money for inventory." He shrugged. "The usual reasons. I've got dreams of a real storefront someday, a place where people can come and know they're getting quality, getting fair prices. But dreams cost money." He looked embarrassed suddenly, like he'd revealed too much. I watched him as he talked. He had calluses on his hands, thick and earned. His shirt was clean but worn thin at the collar, and I noticed he'd stitched a small repair near the shoulder. There was a tiredness around his eyes, but also something else. Something steady and honest and rare. "Your father helped me once," Leo said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "When I first came here, I had nothing. Just off the bus, sleeping in shelters, trying to find work. He owned this house, found me trying to fix a broken window. I wasn't trying to break in. I just saw it was broken and thought I could help. Instead of calling the police, he talked to me, asked about my story. Then he rented me this place for almost nothing until I could get on my feet. Said everyone deserves a chance. Said his own father had gotten a chance once and he was just paying it forward." Leo's voice caught slightly. I never forgot that. When I read about his death in the paper, I wanted to go to the funeral, but I didn't think I'd belong there, with all the important people. I felt something twist in my chest, sharp and painful. My father, the man I'd barely seen growing up, who'd spent his life building businesses and fortunes, attending galas and board meetings. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped to help this man, this stranger, and I'd never known. I'd never asked. I'd never cared enough to wonder what he did with his time beyond making money. "He never mentioned it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He wouldn't," Leo replied. "That wasn't his way. At least that's what I figured. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted to help." We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt the weight of everything I'd never known about my father. All the conversations we'd never had. All the questions I'd never asked. It was too late now. But maybe it wasn't too late to understand him a little better. The days blurred into weeks, each one a little less painful than the last. I learned to wake with the sun, my body adjusting to the rhythm of physical work. I learned to sort vegetables by feel, to know which tomatoes were perfect, and which ones had another day or two. I learned to bargain with suppliers who tried to overcharge Luis, to smile sweetly while negotiating down their prices. My hands stopped hurting quite so much. The blisters hardened into calluses. My back got stronger. I learned to read people, who would buy, who was just looking, who needed to talk more than they needed tomatoes. The lonely widow who came every Tuesday and always bought exactly 3 apples. The construction worker who liked to joke while picking out his lunch. The young mother with twins who counted her money carefully before every purchase. Luis started trusting me to open the stand alone. "You're getting good at this," he said one morning, watching me arrange the day's inventory. "Natural talent for someone who never worked before." I laughed. "I don't know about talent. Desperation, maybe." "Same thing sometimes," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Desperation makes you pay attention, makes you care. Those rich folks, they never had to care about anything." He paused. "No offense." "None taken," I said. "You're right." And he was. I'd never had to care before. About prices, about presentation, about the small daily battles that made up most people's lives. Now, I cared about everything. About every sale, every customer, every dollar that went into my pocket at the end of the day. Leo and I fell into a routine that felt comfortable, almost domestic. We'd eat together most evenings, talking about our days, sharing the small victories and defeats that made up our lives now. He told me about his stand, the regular customers who'd become friends, the dream of expanding, maybe getting a small storefront someday where he could offer more variety, better prices, a real alternative to the big supermarkets that were squeezing out small vendors. I told him about the customers at Luis's stand, the weird requests, the woman who insisted on smelling every single apple before buying one, the man who wanted only vegetables that were perfectly symmetrical, whatever that meant. We laughed more than I expected. The kitchen became our meeting place, our neutral ground, the heart of this strange new life. One night, he brought home a bag of apples. They were bruised, some of them badly, brown spots spreading across their red skin. "These are going bad," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "Can't sell them like this, but they're still good. My grandmother used to make preserves when I was a kid. Spent whole days in the kitchen, the house smelling like sugar and cinnamon. I was thinking." He trailed off, looking almost shy. "You want to try?" I looked at the apples, then at him. "I don't know how to make jam." "Neither do I." "Not really, but we could figure it out." We stayed up late that night, the kitchen steaming, learning from trial and error, and a recipe Leo half remembered from childhood. The first batch burned, filling the kitchen with acrid smoke that made us both cough. The second was too runny, more like apple soup than jam. We argued about sugar ratios and cooking times, laughing at our mistakes, tasting spoonfuls of too hot jam that burned our tongues. The third was perfect, golden and thick, tasting like autumn and possibility, and something I couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. "We could sell this," I said, the idea forming as I spoke. "The stands, the preserves. We could combine them, make it a real business, something that lasts." Leo looked at me, and I saw the hope flicker across his face before caution dampened it. "That takes money, space, permits, licenses. So we start small," I said. "We save, we plan, we build it piece by piece." He smiled slowly, and I realized I'd been waiting to see that smile. "Okay, yeah, let's try." We started the next week. Small batches of jam, made in the evenings after work, sold at both our stands. We invested in labels, simple, clean, with both our names. Word spread slowly, then faster. People came back. They brought friends. One customer posted a photo on social media, and suddenly we had orders coming from people we'd never met. We made apple cinnamon, apple ginger, apple with a hint of vanilla. We experimented with apricots, with peaches, with whatever fruit was too damaged to sell fresh but still good enough to transform. We worked late into the nights, the kitchen filled with steam and sugar, and something that felt dangerously close to happiness. I'd catch Leo watching me sometimes, his expression unguarded, and I'd look away, my heart doing strange, unpredictable things. This wasn't supposed to be my life, but somehow, it was becoming the only life I wanted. Then Gabo showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon, the stand busy with the after-work crowd. I was wrapping jars in newspaper, carefully, the way Leo had taught me when his car pulled up. Expensive, gleaming black, So out of place it might as well have been a spaceship. He got out wearing a suit that cost more than I'd make in 6 months, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Eva. He said my name like he owned it, like he had a right to it. I've been looking for you. I'm working, Gabo. I can see that. He looked around, his face a mixture of pity and disgust, taking in the wooden stand, the crates of vegetables, my stained apron. It's admirable in a way. Very salt of the earth. But come on, this isn't you. Let me help. I've got connections. Lawyers. We can get you back on your feet, back to your real life. This is my real life, I said, continuing to wrap jars. No, your real life is what your uncle stole, and I can help you fight him. I've got the best lawyers in the city, resources, money. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I never stopped caring about you, Eva. I just needed time to process everything. The shock, the scandal. But I'm here now. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the smooth hands that had never done a day's manual labor, at the perfect hair, styled with product that probably cost more than my weekly groceries, at the way he stood like the world owed him space, like his very presence was a gift. I thought about Leo's calloused hands, his worn shirts, the way he looked at me like I was worth something beyond my last name and my bank account. I don't need your help, Gabo. I'm fine. You're selling vegetables, he said, his voice rising slightly. Several customers glanced over. You're living in some slum, making jam like a housewife from the 1950s. That's not fine, Eva. That's tragic. It's more fine than anything I had before, I said quietly. Now please leave. You're scaring away my customers. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language, like I'd become someone he didn't recognize. Maybe I had. Then he shook his head, got back in his car, and drove away, the engine's roar scattering pigeons from the sidewalk. I stood there shaking, not sure if I wanted to laugh or cry or both. A customer approached hesitantly. You okay, honey? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. I'm okay. That night, Leo found me sitting on the front steps of the house, watching the street as evening settled in. Kids were being called home for dinner. A man walked past with a dog. Somewhere, music played. Something in Spanish, guitar, and voices. Normal life, beautiful in its ordinariness. You okay? Leo asked, sitting down beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Gabo showed up. The ex? I nodded. He wanted to rescue me, said this wasn't my real life, that I was tragic. Leo was quiet for a moment. What did you tell him? That it is. My real life. We sat in silence for a while, the street quiet except for distant traffic and the music. Can I tell you something? Leo said finally. My family's not poor. They're actually pretty wealthy. Real estate, investments, some tech stuff I don't fully understand. They've been calling me for months, wanting me to come back, take over the business or at least take a position in the company. They found a girl, Isabella, some kind of arranged situation tied to a merger they're planning. Very traditional, very strategic. He laughed bitterly. They keep saying this is beneath me, that I'm wasting my life playing at being poor, that it's time to grow up and accept my responsibilities. My father threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't come home by the end of the year. I turned to look at him, shocked. Leo. I told him to do it, cut me off. He met my eyes. Because I wanted to know who I was, without their money, without their name, without the weight of expectations and carefully planned futures. I wanted to build something that was mine, something real, something earned. He gestured to the house, the street, the life we'd been building jar by jar. I found that. Here. With this. He paused, and his voice got quieter. With you. My heart stopped. Leo, you don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know you're dealing with your own stuff. I just wanted you to know. I see you, Eva. Not the money you had or the money you lost. Just you. The person who gets blisters and keeps working. Who learns to make jam at midnight. Who laughs at burned batches. That person. I see her and He stopped, shook his head. Never mind. Forget I said anything. But before I could respond, before I could tell him that I saw him too, that somewhere between the burned jam and the late nights I'd started falling for him, my phone rang. Nana. Her voice was shaking. Eva, you need to be careful. Your uncle's been asking about you. Coming around the neighborhood, asking questions. And I found something. She paused, and I heard papers rustling. The lawyer who handled your father's estate, Mr. Romero. I saw him having coffee with your uncle yesterday. At that cafe on 5th. They were looking at documents, talking in low voices. When they saw me, they stopped. Ava, they're planning something. Cold dread settled in my stomach like ice water. What kind of something? I don't know. But Ava, that house you're in? Your uncle's been asking questions about it. About whether anyone's living there. About the deed. I think he knows. I think he's planning to take it too. The next morning, I went to see a lawyer Luis had recommended. A small office above a dry cleaner. Up narrow stairs that creaked with every step. The waiting room smelled like detergent and old paper. The lawyer, Mrs. Chen, was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes in precise handwriting. "Do you have proof?" she asked when I finished. "The original will? Any documentation your father left? Letters? Emails? Anything that shows his intentions?" "Just what Nana told me. And the key to the house. And this." I pulled out the deed Nana had given me. Mrs. Chen examined it carefully, holding it up to the light. "This is old, and it's not notarized properly. Your uncle's will, the one that's been filed with the court, is official, notarized, witnessed. Unless we can prove fraud, unless we can find the original will or concrete evidence that your uncle forged documents, there's nothing we can do. The law is clear. Possession and official documents trump verbal promises." I left feeling hollowed out, like someone had scooped out my insides. Everything I'd built, the new life, the fragile hope, the small business with Leo, it was all standing on ground that could be pulled out from under me at any moment. I walked home slowly, taking the long way, trying to prepare myself for the possibility that I might lose even this small house, this small life, this small happiness. That evening, I was walking back from the stand, thinking about what to tell Leo, when a car pulled up beside me. Not Gabo's car, something bigger, darker. Before I could react, before I could run or scream or do anything, hands grabbed me. Strong hands. A cloth pressed over my face. Chemical smell, sharp and sickeningly sweet. Chloroform, some distant part of my brain registered. And then nothing. Just darkness swallowing me whole. I woke up in darkness, my head pounding like someone was using it as a drum. My mouth tasted like metal and chemicals. My wrists were bound. Duct tape, I realized, feeling the sticky texture against my skin. Slowly, painfully, my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I was in some kind of basement. Concrete walls, damp and cold. A single light bulb hanging from a wire, swaying slightly like it had just been bumped. The air smelled like mold and motor oil. And across from me, sitting on a folding chair like he was waiting for a meeting to start, was my uncle. He looked different than I remembered. Older, harder. Or maybe I just hadn't seen him clearly before. "Ava," he said it pleasantly, conversationally, like we'd bumped into each other at a party. "I'm sorry it came to this, truly, but you've been difficult. You stole everything from me," I said, my voice cracking. My throat hurt. "I didn't steal anything. Your father left it to me. Legitimately. Legally. That's a lie." He smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "Can you prove it?" He stood up, paced slowly across the basement. His shoes clicked on the concrete. "That house you're living in? That's mine too. Everything that was your father's is now mine. And you're going to sign papers saying you have no claim to any of it. That you accept the will as stated. That you relinquish any and all rights to the estate. I won't. You will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure that boyfriend of yours, Leo, is it, has some very serious legal problems. Tax evasion, maybe. Health code violations. Operating a business without proper permits. It's amazing how quickly a small business can be destroyed when the right pressure is applied. When the right officials get the right phone calls. Terror and rage warred inside me. "You can't." "I can, and I will, unless you cooperate." He pulled out papers from a briefcase I hadn't noticed, set them on a rickety table. "Sign these. Walk away. Start over somewhere else. I'll even give you a little money to help you get settled. 20,000. Enough for a fresh start. Or watch everything you've built burn. Watch Leo lose his business. Maybe even face criminal charges. Your choice." My hands shook as I stared at the documents. I thought about Leo, about the jam business we'd started, about Nana, about the life that had felt impossible but had become real, had become mine. And I thought about my father, the man I'd barely known, who'd helped a stranger for no reason except that it was right. What would he do? I need time to think, I said, stalling, hoping someone would notice I was missing, would look for me, would somehow find me in this basement that could be anywhere. My uncle checked his watch, an expensive Rolex that had belonged to my father. That detail hurt more than the ropes. You have 1 hour. Then I make the phone calls that destroy your friend. 1 hour, Ava. Choose wisely. But I didn't need an hour, because in that moment, I heard voices upstairs. Shouting. Footsteps. Something heavy hitting the floor. Leo's voice, loud and angry. Where is she? I know she's here. Nana's voice, surprisingly strong. Call the police. Now. And then footsteps pounding down the stairs, fast and heavy. The door burst open. Leo stood there, breathing hard, his shirt torn at the shoulder, with Nana behind him clutching her phone. And behind them, police officers in uniform, hands on their weapons. My uncle's face went white, then red, cycling through emotions faster than I could track. How did you— Your lawyer got sloppy, Nana said, her voice steady despite her age, despite the danger. I followed him after I saw you two at the cafe, took pictures of you meeting, got recordings of your conversations about how to force Eva's signature, how to make her disappear if necessary. Turns out old ladies can be sneaky when they need to be. Turns out nobody pays attention to us, which makes us very good at surveillance. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, holding a file, her expression triumphant. And I found your father's original will, filed with the courthouse 3 years ago, dated 2 months before his death. He left everything in trust for Eva, with your uncle as temporary executor only until her 25th birthday, which was last month. The executor was supposed to transfer everything to her then. The will you produced, Mr. Castellano, was a forgery. We had a handwriting expert examine it. The signature doesn't match. And we found the forger, your lawyer's cousin. He's already confessed, trying to cut a deal. She looked at my uncle with cold satisfaction. It's over. My uncle stood there, his face cycling through expressions. Shock, anger, calculation, fear. I could see his mind working, looking for an exit, an angle, a way out. Then he ran. He made it 3 steps before the officers caught him, grabbing his arms, pulling them behind his back. He didn't struggle much. What was the point? He was finished. They handcuffed him, read him his rights in that flat official voice cops use. He didn't look at me. Not once. Not as they led him up the stairs. Not when he passed close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. He just stared straight ahead, his face blank, already retreating into whatever defense his mind was constructing. Leo cut my restraints with a pocket knife, his hands shaking slightly. I fell into his arms, my legs weak, my whole body trembling. How did you find me? Nana called, said you didn't come home, said she had a bad feeling. We tracked your phone. You'd dropped it when they grabbed you, but we found it on the sidewalk. Then Nana remembered seeing your uncle's car, mentioned the old warehouse district where your grandfather used to have a business. We checked every building until we heard voices. He pulled back to look at me, his hands gentle on my face. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. My wrist hurt where the tape had been. My head throbbed. My whole body ached. But I was alive, and I was free. I'm okay, I said. I'm okay now. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, paperwork, statements given to police and lawyers and investigators. My uncle's lawyer confessed quickly, providing evidence of the forgery, the fake witnesses, the whole elaborate scheme. The forged will was exposed, analyzed by experts, proven false in ways that left no doubt. My inheritance, the real one, was restored. Bank accounts unlocked, properties transferred, investments returned. Suddenly I had access to everything again. The money, the properties, the cars, the life I'd lost. I stood in Mrs. Chen's office, staring at papers that represented more wealth than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Numbers with so many zeros they stopped meaning anything. What will you do? She asked, watching me with those sharp, assessing eyes. I thought about the marble floors, the drivers waiting outside, the restaurants where I never looked at the prices because I didn't need to. I thought about the emptiness of it all, the hollow sound of my heels in empty halls, the way I'd moved through life without touching it, without being touched by it. And I thought about Leo's kitchen, The steam from boiling apples, his laugh when our first batch burned, the way he looked at me like I was worth seeing. I thought about calloused hands and honest work and falling asleep tired but satisfied, knowing I'd earned the food on my plate and the roof over my head. I want to invest in a business, I said slowly, the plan forming as I spoke. A real one. A storefront for local produce and preserves. Fair wages for everyone who works there. A place that serves the community, not just profits from it. And I want to set up a fund for people like Leo, like my father helped him. People who just need a chance. A loan program with reasonable terms, mentorship, support. No strings attached except the expectation that they'll help someone else when they can. Mrs. Chen smiled, and it softened her whole face. I think your father would like that very much. I signed the papers that mattered. Transferred most of the money into trusts and investments that would do some good. Community programs, small business loans, scholarships for kids from neighborhoods like the one I lived in now. Kept enough to be comfortable, to build something real, to never have to worry about basic needs, but not so much that I'd lose touch with the life I'd found. And then I went home, to the small house with peeling paint, to Leo. He was in the kitchen, of course, stirring a new batch of preserves. The windows were steamed up, and the air smelled like cinnamon and brown sugar. He looked up when I came in, and I saw the question in his eyes, the hope and the fear, both fighting for space. So, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I'm rich again, I said, officially and legally. Everything my father left me. It's all mine now. I paused, watching his face. I could buy a mansion, get my old life back, hire servants and drivers, go back to the world I came from. He nodded slowly, his face carefully neutral, but I saw his knuckles whiten on the wooden spoon. You could, but I don't want to. I crossed the kitchen, stood in front of him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I want to invest in us, in this, in the business we're building, if you'll let me, as an equal partner. Not as someone trying to buy their way into your life, but as someone who wants to build something that matters, something that lasts. Leo set down the spoon carefully, like he was afraid he might drop it. Eva? And I want to stay here, I continued, the words tumbling out faster now. In this house, the one my grandfather bought with nothing but hope and hard work. The one my father used to help people. I want it to mean something. I want to keep it, live in it, maybe fix it up a little. The roof really does leak in the back bedroom, but keep it real, keep it ours. I took a breath. If you want that, if you want me. He kissed me then, and it tasted like apples and cinnamon and tears. His or mine, I couldn't tell. When we broke apart, he was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes and changes everything. Equal partners, he said, in business and everything else, I confirmed. I love you, Eva. I think I have for a while now. Since that night we burned the first batch of jam and laughed until we cried. Since I watched you develop blisters and come back the next day anyway. Since I kissed him again to stop the words, because I didn't need them. I felt them, in the way his hands were gentle on my face, in the way he'd come looking for me when I was missing, in the way he saw me, really saw me, stripped of money and name and everything except the person I was becoming. We stood there in that tiny kitchen, the steam rising around us, and I felt richer than I ever had in my old life, because this was real, this was earned, this was mine in a way nothing had ever been mine before, not given, not inherited, not bought, built, chosen, created from broken pieces and second chances. 6 months later, we opened the storefront. It took time to find the right location, not too expensive, but in a neighborhood that needed it, that would appreciate it. We settled on a corner spot on Morrison Street, not far from where I'd first started working with Luis. The building needed work. Leo and I spent weeks scrubbing floors, painting walls, building shelves. My hands, once soft and manicured, became permanently stained with paint and calloused from hammering nails. I'd never been prouder of anything. Castellano and Leo's read the sign, hand-painted by a local artist we'd commissioned. Local produce, small batch preserves, community supported, fair prices, fair wages, fair practices. We hired Luis as our produce manager. He cried when we offered him the job, tried to refuse at first, said we should hire someone younger, but we insisted. His knowledge, his relationships with growers, his understanding of quality, that was invaluable. We hired 3 other employees, all from the neighborhood, all people who needed a chance the way I'd needed one. My father would have liked it, I think. I hope. Sometimes I stand in the store after closing, when it's quiet, and the last light comes through the windows at an angle, and I talk to him, tell him about the business, about Leo, about the person I've become. I don't know if he can hear me, but it helps anyway. Nana definitely liked it. She came to the opening, tears streaming down her face, telling anyone who'd listen about how I'd found my way. Her father would be so proud, she kept saying, gripping my hand with her arthritic fingers. So proud. She became a regular fixture at the store, sitting in the corner in a comfortable chair we'd put there specifically for her, greeting customers, telling stories about my grandfather's first days in America. People loved her. She became part of the community, part of the fabric of the place. Even Luis came, proud as a father at graduation, bringing his whole family, a wife I'd never met, 3 grown children, 2 grandchildren. He introduced me as the girl who didn't know a tomato from a potato, but learned anyway. High praise from Luis. We laughed, and he clapped me on the shoulder with one of those weathered hands, and I felt like I'd passed some kind of test I didn't even know I was taking. Leo's family came too, which surprised me. I'd been nervous about meeting them, these wealthy strangers who'd tried to control Leo's life, who'd offered him everything if he'd just give up on his dreams. They arrived in expensive cars, dressed like they were going to a business meeting. Leo's father was tall and stern, his mother elegant and cool. They looked around the store with expressions I couldn't quite read. "So this is it," his father said finally. "This is what you chose instead of the company." "Yes," Leo said, his hand finding mine, squeezing gently. "This is what I chose." His father was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up a jar of our apple cinnamon preserve, examined the label. "Your grandmother would have liked this," he said softly. "She always said the best things were made with your own hands." He looked at Leo, and something passed between them. Not quite approval, but maybe understanding. A beginning. "I still think you're wasting your potential. But," he paused, "but I can see you're happy, and that's worth something." Leo's mother was harder to read. She examined everything with a critical eye. The displays, the prices, the customers who came in. I saw her watching me serve an elderly woman, helping her count out change with patience, asking about her grandchildren. Later, as they were leaving, she pulled me aside. "My son has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you," she said. "I wanted him to marry Isabella. Good family, good connections. But she wouldn't have made him happy." She paused. "You do. I can see that. So I suppose I'll have to accept it. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was honest. I could work with honest." "Thank you," I said. "I love him." "I know," she said. "Just don't break his heart. He's stronger than he looks, but not that strong." "I won't," I promised. And I meant it. Isabella herself sent a card, which surprised everyone. "I heard about your store," it read in neat handwriting. "I'm glad Leo found something real. He deserves that. We both know I wasn't right for him. I was just convenient. I hope you're happy together." It was signed simply with her name. Leo read it and smiled sadly. "She's a good person," he said. "Just caught in the same trap I was. Expectations and duty and family pressure. Will she be okay?" "I think so. Last I heard, she told her parents she's going to law school instead of getting married. Caused quite a scandal." He grinned. "I like her better now than I ever did before." Gabo sent a card too. I didn't open it for 3 days. When I finally did, steeling myself for recriminations or attempts to worm his way back in, I found something unexpected. "Eva, I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me, for only showing up when I thought you might be useful again. You deserved better, and I failed you. I'm glad you found something real. You look happy in the photos I've seen. Actually happy, not the fake smile you used to wear at parties. Good luck with everything." I stared at the card for a long time. It didn't change anything, didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, but it was something. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or the closest thing to an apology Gabo was capable of giving. I filed it away in a drawer and didn't think about it again. Some doors are better left closed, even when someone finally bothers to knock. My uncle went to prison. 5 years for fraud, conspiracy, kidnapping. His lawyer got 3. I didn't attend the sentencing. Mrs. Chen offered to take me, said it might give me closure, but I declined. That chapter was over. I didn't need to watch it end. I had new chapters to write, better ones. Though sometimes late at night I thought about him, wondered what had twisted him into someone who could betray family so completely. Greed, jealousy, a lifetime of being second to my father, always in his shadow? I'd never know, and maybe it didn't matter. Some people make choices that can't be explained or forgiven. You just have to move on. The business grew steadily, not explosively. We weren't trying to become a chain or franchise or anything corporate. Just steady, sustainable growth. We added more products. Honey from a local beekeeper, bread from a baker who worked out of her home kitchen, eggs from a small farm outside the city. Everything local. Everything we could verify was produced ethically. Everything we'd be proud to sell. We became a hub for the community. People came in not just to shop, but to talk, to connect, to share news. We put up a bulletin board where people could post jobs, housing opportunities, items for sale. We hosted a kids' cooking class on Saturday mornings, teaching them to make simple preserves with their parents. We gave away produce that was too old to sell, but still good. No one in our neighborhood would go hungry if we could help it. And slowly, carefully, we launched the loan program I'd envisioned. Small amounts, $500, $1,000, sometimes $2,000. Enough to help someone start a business or get through a rough patch. Low interest, reasonable terms, and mentorship from Leo and me. We helped a woman start a catering business, a man open a repair shop, a young couple launch a cleaning service. Not everyone succeeded, but most did. And those who did paid it forward, helping the next person, creating a network of support that grew organically, naturally. One evening, a young man came into the store just before closing. He was nervous, kept starting to speak, and then stopping. Finally, he managed, "I heard you help people. With loans. For businesses." "We do," I said gently. "What do you have in mind?" He told me about his dream, a mobile food cart, selling his grandmother's recipes, food from his culture that wasn't available in the neighborhood. He had the skills, the knowledge, the passion. He just needed startup capital. We talked for an hour. His name was Marcus. He reminded me of Leo, of myself, someone with potential and zero opportunities, just waiting for someone to take a chance. We gave him a loan. 6 months later, his cart was thriving. He stopped by regularly to drop off payments and tell us about his customers, his plans to maybe get a second cart, hire his cousin. "You changed my life," he said one day. "No," I told him. "You changed your own life. We just helped a little." But I thought about what he'd said as he left, about changing lives, about how my father had changed Leo's life, how Nana had changed mine, how Mrs. Chen and Luis had helped me when I needed it, how we all carried forward the kindness shown to us, multiplying it, spreading it like ripples in water. That was the real inheritance my father had left me. Not money, not property, but the understanding that we're all connected, that helping one person helps everyone, that kindness isn't weakness, but the strongest force in the world. Leo and I got married on a Tuesday afternoon in the store, surrounded by shelves of produce and jars of preserves and everyone who mattered. Nana cried. Luis gave a rambling toast about tomatoes and life that somehow made perfect sense. Leo's parents came, and his mother actually smiled. A real smile, not the polite society mask. We didn't have a fancy reception or a destination honeymoon. We closed the store for a week and drove up the coast, staying in cheap motels, eating at diners, watching the ocean and talking about everything and nothing. It was perfect. We came back tanned and happy and ready to keep building our life. The store, the community programs, the loan fund, and eventually, we hoped, a family. We'd talked about it late at night, lying in bed in the small house that we'd slowly been fixing up. New roof, painted walls, but keeping the character, the history, the soul of the place. "I want kids to grow up the way we didn't," Leo said, with both privilege and understanding, with opportunities but also awareness of what those opportunities cost, where they come from. "Yes," I agreed. "I want them to know the value of work, of building something with your own hands, of helping others." "They will," he said. kissing my forehead. We'll teach them. Sometimes late at night, when Leo's asleep beside me and the house is quiet, except for the sounds of the neighborhood, distant music, cars passing, life happening all around us, I think about the girl I was, the one who measured worth in price tags and square footage and brand names, the one who'd never noticed the people who made her comfortable life possible, the one who'd walked past suffering and struggle without seeing it, without caring. I don't miss her, but I don't hate her either. She was necessary, I think, to become who I am now. You can't appreciate light without darkness. Can't understand what matters until you lose everything else. She was the seed. I'm the tree. Different, but connected. The same, but transformed. And I'm grateful to her, in a strange way. Grateful that she was shallow enough to need this lesson. Grateful that loss broke her open so something real could grow in the cracks. The other day, a young woman came into the store. She looked lost, desperate, wearing clothes too nice for someone shopping for vegetables, designer jeans, expensive shoes, a coat that probably cost more than our weekly payroll. I recognized that look immediately, the one that says the world just shifted and I don't know how to stand anymore, the one I'd worn not so long ago. "Can I help you?" I asked, approaching gently. She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know what I need. Everything fell apart. My family, my money, my whole life. Someone said you might. She trailed off, embarrassed. Said you might understand. I smiled. How about an apple? And maybe a conversation? We talked for over an hour. Her story was different from mine. A divorce, not a death. A betrayal by a partner. Not family, but with the same hollow ache underneath. The same loss of identity, of purpose, of the scaffolding that had held up her entire life. When she left, I'd given her Mrs. Chen's card, Luis's number, the address of the community center where they had job training programs, and an apple. A perfect red apple from a local orchard, still smelling like autumn. Start small, I told her. One day, one step, one apple at a time. You'll be amazed what you can build from broken pieces. She looked at me with something like hope flickering in her eyes. Did you? Build something from broken pieces? Yes, I said simply. I did, and so can you. I watched her leave, walking a little taller, holding that apple like it was a promise. And I thought about doors, how they close and open, often when we least expect it. How sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters. How the worst thing that ever happened to me became the best thing, because it brought me here, to this store, this community, this life, to Leo, to myself. Sometimes people just need a door opened. My father taught me that, even if I didn't learn it until after he was gone. He'd opened doors for people all his life, quietly, without fanfare, without expecting anything in return. And one of those people had been Leo, who'd opened a door for me when I had nowhere else to go. And now I got to open doors for others. It wasn't charity. It was reciprocity. It was how the world was supposed to work. Leo and I are planning to expand next year. Maybe a second location in another neighborhood that needs it. Maybe a small cafe attached to the store, a place where people can sit and talk and build the kind of community that seems to be disappearing everywhere else. We'll see where it goes. There's no rush. We're building something that lasts, brick by brick, jar by jar, conversation by conversation, kindness by kindness, day by day. And every morning, when I wake up in that small house with peeling paint, though we did finally get around to painting the outside, a cheerful yellow that makes the whole block brighter, I don't miss the marble floors. I don't miss the empty halls or the fancy cars or the restaurants with more forks than anyone needs. I found something better. I found myself. And I found home. Not in a place, though I love this house with its creaky stairs and small rooms and memories soaking into the walls, but in a life, in work that matters, in love that's real, in a community that knows my name, in the satisfaction of exhaustion earned through effort, in the knowledge that I'm building something that will outlast me, that will keep opening doors long after I'm gone. That's my father's real legacy. Not the money he made, or the businesses he built, or the properties he owned, but the lives he touched, the doors he opened, the kindness he showed when no one was watching. And now it's my legacy too. Mine and Leo's. And someday, our children's, and the people they help. Ripples spreading outward, touching shores we'll never see. And That's worth more than all the marble floors in the world. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share it. Not for me, but for the person who needs to hear it. The person standing where I stood, lost, angry, certain the world has nothing left for them. They need to know that endings can be beginnings, that losing everything might be the only way to find what matters, that the smallest house can hold the biggest life, that second chances are real, but sometimes you have to build them yourself, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one kindness at a time. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, real ones, messy ones, about real people who discovered that kindness and second chances aren't just for movies. They're for all of us, if we're brave enough to accept them, if we're humble enough to ask for help, if we're strong enough to start over. Because that's what I learned. In that small house on that ordinary street in that neighborhood I'd never noticed before. Starting over isn't giving up. It's growing up. It's finally becoming who you were meant to be all along. And sometimes, the best inheritance isn't what you receive. It's what you give away.